and tied to this Dominion software machinery. So Dominion is interesting because, you get into like, well, people think about the China and the Venezuela aspect of Dominion, right? And also Smartmatic, the software that goes in conjunction with those machines. But Dominion's domiciled where? In Canada. What is that? That's British Commonwealth. Okay. Who's Trudeau? Trudeau's father was a disciple of the New World Order. He trained with Eliot as well, the teacher of Kissinger within Harvard. These people are at small, when you go higher and higher, as you know, it's like who shows up at Davos? It's not everybody that shows up at Davos. It's not the working class, that's for sure. It's not, most people aren't invited. Who's there? Well, someone, World Economic Forum is part of their brochure is the head of Qantas, the airline that's saying that you're going to have to get vaccination if you want to travel on our airline. So you really go up to the top. It's like the ideology gets smaller and smaller as far as, how do you say, the grouping, the cluster of that 1% gets smaller, it shrinks, and the ideology becomes more clear. And the ideology is what? It's about controlling the population. At one level, they thought they could control the population through eugenics and sterilization programs. And then once they start getting people like Bill Gates, he's a tech guy, right? So once they start incorporating the technology side, you start going to the transhuman agenda, and it becomes clear we're dealing with, the desire for using nanotechnologies to infiltrate the human body, including it through vaccines, and ultimately being able to co-opt and control the human. This is what was told to us by Aaron Russo, the documentary filmmaker from Freedom to Fascism. Was a really good documentary he did. He hung out with Nicholas Rockefeller in the 90s in New York, and he's like, we were talking all the time about what was their desire, the elite, Rockefeller, like they have, like, you guys have so much wealth, you have so much power, you have the foundations, you influence, you put money to organizations, that become the BLMs and all these organizations that appear grassroots, you're the real benefactors. What do you want? And Nick told him, like Nick Rockefeller said, the ultimate agenda is to basically be able to chip people, and then you have total control over the population. And I just think that's where it ultimately is going. And they just have to get there step by step. And it takes generations. But also the beauty is that people don't see the conspiracy if it takes generations. And they don't see how it's built up over time. And they don't realize that their liberties have been stripped away until all of a sudden you're confronted with this moment, which we're confronted with right now, which is like so urgent for patriots here going, wait a minute, this is it. If we let them steal this election and we let Biden and company roll in, this may be the end of America. It's an alarming feeling.
No, it is, and I think it is the end. If I don't think Biden's going to get in, but if Biden does get in, we know from John Kerry already saying that Biden is completely on board moving forward with the Great Reset. Everything's in place. He's going to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord. He's going to undo everything that Trump has done already. So I think that's a given. That's where they wanted to go. And I think this is why they've been pushing the Great Reset right now, because people believe that Joe Biden is the president-elect and they're moving forward with their plan. I know we talked about a little bit about the election, about how, and you said how they stopped counting in the middle of the night, and how do you do this? Do you think just this election was manipulated, or do you think we've been living in years of manipulation with presidential elections?
Well, that's why I never really paid attention until Trump won. And then I was kind of curious, because I'm like, you got to have some strong people backing you, to get into that position. I do think the American people came out stronger in droves more than they expected in 2016. And again, that's why if you hear what Sidney Powell is saying, it makes sense. They predicted Biden's landslide win because they knew that they had the algorithms with Dominion. They couldn't account on the fact that Trump got 10 plus million more votes than the last election, which drove him up to the place where they had to stop to bring in more ballots to actually beat him once they knew, okay, he's got all these people showing up on the day of the election. And obviously he's up by, 100,000 plus in 3 of those states. So they knew that they needed X amount to beat him. But if you think about it, we know, we talk about the deep state apparatus. CIA is one of the great examples of deep state. CIA, since 1948, was involved in overthrowing and rigging elections. Go back to Italy. We didn't want the socialist, or communistic, I guess it was prime minister at the time. But the point is that So we've seen throughout the Cold War history America's deep state at work in foreign countries. We've seen them, arming dictators, arming death squads, or arming the rebels to overturn that we don't like, rigging elections, influencing elections, even against Putin in 2000. I think it was 12. There was this whole thing about Hillary and company really trying to create a color revolution there in Russia, and so we've seen it projected outward. Would that happen here? Absolutely. And I don't know enough to say which election in particular. I can tell you, for example, we know Kennedy won by the grace of the mob, bringing up hundreds of thousands of dead people to Illinois and Texas. I guess the cows, they said, were voting in Texas, but they made sure that he won both those states. Definitely Illinois had a rig going. So there's throughout our history, definitely, I think, a selection process that's taken place. And I think that's why many people were discouraged by America. And unfortunately, it's like they've weaponized those who were discouraged by America and by the overall corruption. And let's say that what they felt like was a system that was not fair to people. And they've weaponized it, right? So, people like myself, even who, have sympathy for the history of Black Americans, for example, Native Americans, the inequality of our system as a legacy. They weaponized those emotions and turned it into a vitriolic hatred of America. This is very symbolic of the color revolutions that people like Soros. Again, Soros is the author of Towards a New World Order. He's someone who's as we know, just a global financier who's manipulated many countries, economies, destroyed many lives in Thailand and other economies in the late 90s. So he's a manipulator. And when the open societies are starting to set up shop here and influence, BLM and the various movements that are growing up, and the people in government who are tied to Antifa or BLM, you start to understand the money side flowing in. It's creating what would be a color revolution here based on actual sentiment, people feeling frustrated and outraged, but misdirected and misguided and warped by Soros and company. And again, Soros is part of this Davos elite, World Economic Forum people. That's what he said in 2018. We want to see Trump gone in 2020. Like, it's their agenda, and they're manipulating the real sentiment of people. And that's what creates such a dangerous moment here. So have elections been manipulated in this country? I believe all throughout there's been a selection process, but they couldn't account for the fact that Trump actually genuinely had so much support from the American people in 2016. They had to destroy him since day one, verbally through the media, attacking Flynn, obviously. So 2020, they're just like, they're bringing everything they can. Coronavirus, protests, all this, this noise as much as possible as we see now. And let's see how it plays out. Obviously in this winter, it's going to be fascinating.
If he does prove that there was election fraud and he has the electors choose him, depending on how all this works out with Article 2, what do you think this new world order, this deep state, will do if the people decide that he is the president?
Well, that's what's so interesting. What's really interesting to me is how Trump, technically, General McNerney is saying, and I think Flynn would agree, and I would agree with him, Trump has every right to, at this point, go to military response. As far as the indications are that there's foreign influence in the election through the Dominion machinery and the software, right? The raid on the raid in Germany to get the servers. If there's evidence of this, he has every right to declare military action necessary. And at the same time, I see him playing out the sort of public, and I say it's a game in the sense of let the people stand up and recognize it. Let the people, as you pointed out, see for themselves. If he rushes into military action, it may be necessary at the last moment, but until then, people have to see how there's legislatures having hearings and the testimony and the people that are outraged saying, look, there's, I can't talk about Dominion, but, the woman that's talking, I don't know if it was Michigan, I think it was Michigan, basically just saying like, I saw this, that, and the other, and she's giving her testimony of fraud. That's what's important. It's that real people seeing this, real people standing up. What Trump's saying, the people have to do the right thing in the legislatures, right? In the lawyers, the legislators, the judges, everyone has to do the right thing, because I believe everyone is being monitored at this point. We know how the deep state is entrenched, yes, but the patriots are here too. And if we don't stand with the patriots, it's going to be a very dangerous, as we talked about, the great result that follows is dangerous. I think it's a battle for all of our lives. It's not just that the deep state has to battle for its life. No, the American people have to battle for our lives. I mean, if you're talking about the government telling you you have to be forced to shut down and wear a mask, and then you have to be forced to vaccinate, that literally could, who knows, debilitate people, kill people. We don't know what they're putting into us. This is a battle for our lives. We have to treat it as such.
Yes, I agree. I think the people need to see all of this so the people rise up and push the agenda. I don't think it can come from Trump. I think part of it can come from Trump, but I think it has to come from we the people. And I think this is why it has to play out this way, because I think a lot of people have been sleeping. People don't want to know. People just pretend that everything is great. And they've been snowed by the mainstream media for a very, very long time, because I call them the bullhorn of the deep state. They're the ones who are giving everyone the information of what's going on. And if we got rid of the mainstream media today, I think a lot of people would see a lot of things differently. Actually, I think the pandemic would be different. I think the election would be very different. I think a lot of things would be very different. And I think moving forward, not just we the people, but Trump, his team, the people that have been working with him, they needed these people to walk through the front door, because the silent majority, they came out, they voted for the president they wanted. It was a huge landslide. And the only way to cover it up was by cheating, like you've never seen cheating before. I think this is the only way to capture these individuals, where they knowingly did this on purpose. And I think this is where we are right now.
Yeah, I see it in a similar fashion. I have to believe that they were being monitored. It would be insane for Trump not to have known, because obviously he talks so much about the mail-in and the danger of the mail-ins. So the idea of this being a sting operation, that's what I pray it is. I do know, like I said, all I know is that at this point, the Patriots have to realize that this is their best opportunity. This is the best opportunity that we've ever had, in my lifetime at least, to regain this country from this various, again, the New World Order concept. It's people about globalization. Globalization is inevitable. Yes, we are globalizing. We're culturally exchanging. We're able to have trade with countries that we never even knew existed, 20 years ago. What people have seen is the concentration of wealth through the globalization process in fewer and fewer hands. Right, and that's where I think we have to navigate. Again, going back to this notion of national sovereignty. I talked earlier about the national system of economics. Most people have never heard of the national system of economics because they've been manipulated through their education systems into believing it's either communism or capitalism. Well, Adam Smith's capitalism and Karl Marx's communism both are derivative of the British Empire. They both come out of British imperial practices and policies. What is the national system of economics? The national system is like Henry Carey, who was an advisor of Abraham Lincoln. I think in its root, the national system would not allow for a central bank to control its monetary supply, and certainly going back to our Constitution, the central bank is not supposed to have that power. But more importantly, the national system says there's a harmony of interests that exists between business and labor. They actually deployed Marx, the British imperialists and others, deployed Marx against this philosophy to say there was a class war. But the national system, the American system, says, no, there's no class war. It's actually the businessman, like Henry Ford, for example, later understood. I want my workers to have decent wages, good wages, so they can buy my goods. That's the businessman's philosophy, you see. The financier's philosophy, the banker's philosophy is, I want people to be in debt. I don't care what their wages are, as long as they can be in debt, right? I can give them access to debt, credit, whatever you want to call it, but ultimately they'll never be able to pay off their debt. So I don't care what their wages are. That's the financier philosophy, right? How I can craft them. The businessman's philosophy is, I want people to do well so we can all share in the bounty. We can all exchange goods, right? And a fair trade, these policies. So there's a big shift that has to come in our thinking and understanding that this history, this national school that goes, like some people call it the American system, Henry Clay talked about and others, that's what we have to get back to. And Trump, even when he talks about infrastructure and things like this, he's getting very much an American system philosophy. Tariffs, all these are American system, American school of economics. This is what's been lost. Americans have literally been detached, disconnected from their own history to believe that they're part of some battle between communism and capitalism. Well, monopoly capitalism doesn't serve the American people, and communism certainly doesn't serve the American people. We got to get back to our roots.
If Trump gets back into office, do you think he'd be able to stop this Great Reset, stop the New World Order?
Trump is such a wild card. I feel like he's going to continue what he's doing, which is destroying this deep state. It's a process. This is something people say, why isn't it happening already? Why isn't it done? I mean, come on. Michael Flynn was taken out on day one. Michael Flynn was the charge. They really helped guide Trump. Trump is navigating very, very dangerous waters, and for 4 years was accused of being a Russian puppet. He had no authority, right? And they impeached him. In the process, I think he did pretty well as far as keeping the economy. I know the bottom third of the economy grew some years. We've been talking about that. That's obviously not just white people. So this idea of how they portrayed him, it's like such inversion. I think he can at least he can keep us from it because he will stay strong. And I think if he prevails in this process with all the evidence that I'm sure he has, the military has, he could strengthen this country at the core, at the root, with the understanding that we are fighting. See, I've never believed in the wars that we fought because they were never, I thought, on behalf of the interests of the American people. A war against the deep state, the oligarchs, the Bill Gates of the world, who think that they can tell people what to do. That's a war worth fighting for. So I think Trump, with an 80 million real people mandate saying, there's any problem overturning the Great Reset, at least from the Americans' perspective in America, and further just strengthening our country, which actually is going to strengthen the whole planet. If America is strong, other nations will recognize what we're doing is working, and they'll start to free themselves from the chains that are currently connecting like the web, strengthening the people of this planet under the guise of these international bodies that are supposed to be helping people, but ultimately just siphoning money away from them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that nations, they will lift themselves up if they see the United States shine. Sean, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Do you have a website or any place that people can go and see your work?
Absolutely. SeanStone.info is my website. And then I'm on Instagram and Twitter and all those, YouTube, all that stuff.
Great. I'll put all the links at the bottom of the video. This way people can go right over to it. Thank you.